Well, thank you very much for joining us today and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. We've built this one as kind of looking at the future of tourism and social enterprise. We know the tourism sector has been particularly challenged, I think, at times during COVID, during lockdown. I also, I guess, speaking from my own experience of being in a tourist town, I guess we've also seen the visitors come through again as restrictions have been lifted, but there's still a nervousness, I think, in the town where I stay, and there's still a limited number of activities that people can be involved in. So we know it's still having a big impact. And I'm delighted today to kind of have three people joining us on our panel. So we've got Sarah from SENScot. Sarah heads up the Tourism Social Enterprise Network. So she's going to start us off today, really giving a bit of an overview about I guess a bit of the impact of COVID on the tourism social enterprise sector, but also looking at what is being planned in terms of looking at the future of that. We're then going to hear from Zakia at Invisible Cities. Zakia's joined us on a couple of sessions before, so I know we're in for some great stuff from Zakia today. And again, just some really, I hope something inspirational about how, despite challenges, you've tried to, I guess, adapt. So looking forward to hearing more from Zakia. And I'm really looking forward also to hearing from Matt, because I've been practicing my Gaelic quickly before this webinar went live. So delighted that Matt can join us from Ceangail. Is that right? Whew. Phew, that's the toughest bit of the day over for me now. And also he's president of the Stirling Highland Games, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Matt's got to say as well, because that's a story I guess I haven't heard yet, as we've kind of been hearing from lots of social enterprises. So without holding us back anymore, because you haven't come to listen to me, you've come to listen to our speakers, I'm going to hand over to Sarah to start us off for today's session. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Naomi, and hello everybody. It's quite weird being on a webinar, not being able to see everybody's faces. I'm going to share my screen because I've made up some slides. You'll notice that I put lovely pictures in the slides, and they're all from network members. So this one is from Findhorn Bay Arts. I thought it would be useful very quickly to give a quick overview of SENScot and the thematic networks. So we are an intermediary funded by the Third Sector Division of the government. So we work quite closely with SES. And one of the things that we do is we support social enterprises through social enterprise networks. So there are local networks all over the country, but there are also the thematic networks, tourism being one of them. These are the others, and any social enterprises, it's open to join in with the networks and get involved in the things that are happening. It's completely free. The interesting thing about the social enterprise networks is, alongside that peer support and bringing social enterprises together, we also provide that opportunity to connect with what's going on at a national level with that policy. So, for example, around tourism, we work closely with Visit Scotland, with the Scottish Tourism Alliance. We connect with Historic Environment Scotland, the Tourism Division of Government. So we have and a raft of others, but we have those close connections so that we can really create an opportunity for social enterprises to develop those relationships themselves. And have a voice at what goes on at a national level. So when it comes to tourism social enterprises within the network, we've got round about, I think we've got about 130 now. That's terrible, I should know the number. And they do a variety of different things, as you can imagine. So we've got some accommodation providers in there, lots of food and drink things happening, adventure tourism, lots happening around that. Heritage has been a harder nut to crack. I think that there are lots of heritage organisations out there that are social enterprises that maybe don't see themselves as social enterprises, and also don't necessarily see themselves as part of the tourism sector, which is interesting, because I think most people would assume that heritage organisations would see themselves as that, but not necessarily. There's an awful lot of events happening, and that again reaches beyond traditional tourism organisations into a variety of different social enterprises who get involved in events or run events that are sometimes predominantly for the community, but very often they have a tourism facing focus as well. So there's a whole variety of different types of organisations, and you'll obviously hear from Invisible Cities in Ceangail about the work that they're doing. But I think what's important to recognise, obviously from a social enterprise point of view, is how they deliver for the communities they work in. So there's an awful lot around education, and employability is a really obvious one. But there's a lot being done around accessibility. If you think about some of those adventure tourism organisations, tackling accessibility on a whole new level. Isolation and loneliness. Again, you think about those events that are happening across the country, and actually they're massively important to tackling isolation and loneliness. Same with some of those heritage organisations, not recognising the impact they have on isolation and loneliness in a community. So there's a whole variety of different things happening across the country in social enterprise and tourism. So obviously we have had COVID, the world's tipped upside down, and we have had a very strange few months, regardless of what sector you're in, or unemployed, or everybody has had their own experiences, both negative and positive. When it comes to the tourism industry, tourism was hit incredibly hard, and we know, I mean, everybody knows this. You've seen the news, you've seen what's in the press, and there is a big drive to shift that that experience, and to try and shift how tourism is supported and developed going forward. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. We're obviously in a situation where things change almost on a daily rate, it feels like at the moment. And for the tourism sector, that has a massive impact. So the obvious ones, food and drink, we see that on the news daily, but there are lots of other organisations that it's having an impact on, and certainly Matt will be able to talk about some of the impact that that's had around running an event. But I think what to be aware of, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, Naomi, I'm sure will stop me if I'm running over, but I think there are some things to be aware of and to maybe look out for and get involved in. So the Scottish Tourism Recovery Task Force was created. So the government are obviously involved in that, but it's key industry involvement within it. And they have come up with a variety of different things. So they were very, very much at the heart of developing some of those funds that we saw come out earlier in the year. So the funds for events, the funds for self-caterers, for hotels, they were very much at the heart of that. And at the moment, they're developing scenario plans. So there are a variety of different scenarios that they're coming up with. They have been working on that closely with government, and Visit Scotland will be developing toolkits which will be due out in October to help organisations navigate all the different situations that they might find themselves in. The National Tourism Strategy as well, Outlook 2030. Now there is a whole section in there that is focused on communities, and in actual fact, if you look at each of the priorities, social enterprise fits nicely into all of them, but certainly around the thriving places, there's some really interesting stuff happening. So that's currently being reviewed to have a look at how, you know, what actions need to happen going forward. And it's worth keeping an eye on the conversations around that. So if you have, in fact, if you sign up, I strongly recommend signing up for the Scottish Tourism Alliance information that they have going out, because at the moment they're very much at the head of what's going on and are sending information out on a weekly basis about all of these different things. Have a look at the Visit Scotland guidance as well. There's an awful lot on there, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone to Visit Scotland. I know that people have different views on them. They are not the same organisation they once were, and they are filled with people who have a phenomenal amount of knowledge and expertise and can provide support. The We're Good to Go scheme was launched, and I see lots of social enterprises using that, but it's self-certification, so you can go through the toolkit and really just kind of pick up on some of the advice that they have around that. I suspect that most of you, if you're not already open, that perhaps you're pushing back a little bit further. It would be interesting to know where people are there. But it's worth having, even if you've got your doors open already, it's worth having a look at the We're Good to Go scheme. Let me, Naomi. Look at that timing.
All right, it's the quick prompt I always give, so feel free to just finish up, Sarah.
Well, I think the only thing to add, well, obviously we can have some questions afterwards and some conversations, but I think feel free to, Naomi, I'm guessing you'll send out the slides anyway for everybody, yeah? So I've attached the links in the slides. Feel free to get in touch with me if you want to chat about anything that we're doing, or if you'd like to join the network, you can just join the network, or you can have a conversation. But I'm quite keen to hear what people's experiences are and hear about things going forward. So please do just get in touch.
No, thank you very much, Sarah. And yep, as you go through the webinar, it is different having kind of just the presenters on rather than everyone that's participating, but please do use the chat and use the Q&A, and we'll try and bring you in and do it that way. So there's hopefully the chance for lots of that engagement and questions. And we will share the slides. So thank you very much for that. I'm delighted now to introduce Zakia, and I think I've got slides for Zakia. So when you're ready, Zakia, if you let me know and I can put them up, but I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and supporting me with the slides as well through my technology phobia. So yeah, if we can go on to the first slide. Fabulous. And then just click, if you can click through the next one. I just wanted to quickly introduce Invisible Cities. We are a social enterprise that trains people who have experienced homelessness to become walking tour guides of their own cities. And so we provide transferable skills training, confidence building, public speaking, but also a lot of training around heritage and development and access to other opportunities within the tourism, hospitality sector for the people that we work with. But most importantly, we provide people with a voice. We let people tell their own stories of their own cities, what they like the best, what they don't like, their own experiences of what's happened for them, and offer walking tours to tourists and locals alike. The idea being that a walking tour is a perfect experience or space for you to meet somebody you would not have met otherwise, and break down the stigma that still exists around homelessness. So if we can click onto the next slide, we were set up in 2016 and so have been running for a few years now. And last year, 2019 was our biggest year to date with a little under 5,000 customers, but also an expansion to other cities but Edinburgh. So in Scotland, we operate in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and then in England, in Manchester and York. And we had plans, obviously, before the world changed dramatically to expand to Cardiff and Wales. Obviously, that's been put on hold. So we are a tour operator, and of course, like everybody else, I'm sure we saw cancellations after cancellations. They were pretty depressing weeks, I have to say, but we work a lot with international customers, whether that's international tour operators or international schools, groups of students that come to the UK. So all of that didn't happen all at once when lockdown was announced for us. The whole of February, I could see already cancellations and contracts being already kind of postponed or cancelled altogether, or what I could see was other organisations kind of going down. So even, you know, with hope that things could go back to normal, then, you know, there was a big understanding that, for example, if an operator had contracted us to run tours for 1,000 people next year, then they were no longer going to exist. So we lost all our business. But for us, you know, as a social enterprise, the most important thing is our guide and trainees and supported volunteers, the people that we work with and we work for. And so my priority had always been making sure that they were safe, that they were healthy, that they had access to good food, but also activities, they could stay engaged. So actually, while we had no tours and no customers, no product to sell, we were still quite busy as a team trying to do all that we could do to ensure that we would not lose people after when things would get back to a new normal, that we still had guides and we still had trainees and we still had people engaged. And on other webinars, but also on, you know, on having conversations with other entrepreneurs, a few people have said that for people experiencing homelessness or being actually at home meant that engagement was a bit higher, because it's a bit easier to go and have a meeting rather than the face-to-face. So we also saw that for some of our trainees, it was easier actually to connect with them at home through devices that sometimes we provided. We did a lot of training onto how to access Zoom, how to access WhatsApp. So as a team, we were quite busy. But I, as a leader, I was quite conscious that that business didn't bring in any income. So if we can go on to the next slide. I thought I would share what we've been trying to do and how we try to navigate through the last few months. So hopefully it gives you ideas and it can spark some nice conversations. A really important thing that I've spent a lot of time doing was navigating what the map of partners looked like for us. This isn't mine, but I thought it was a brilliant representation of who we could be working with as an organisation. So maybe it's an online travel agent, or it's a platform that supports the booking of our tours, you know. So trying to realise who the partners were and talk to them a lot more than I would usually do in normal circumstances. So I felt that was a really useful exercise, but also that has brought on a lot of potential opportunities, either to highlight the business to other professionals in the sector, but also to new opportunities for selling different things in the future. So on to the next slide, please. One thing that I heard over and over again is diversify, pivot, all these words, which I think all of us are in the same boat when it comes to that. But if I have to hear one more time, people ask me, have you thought about doing a virtual tour? You know, I think, of course we have, but for us, the difficulty is that at the core of who we are as a business and as a social enterprise, we want to create that space for our guests, our travelers and our guides to meet, communicate, share and break down stigma. And so there's a big part of what all of us in the team felt is that having a virtual experience wouldn't really convey that. And so for us, then the debate is, do you go against your core to diversify your product? So we've spent a lot of time, again, as a team, trying to think about new avenues, new segments, new groups of people we could target once tours could be back on the road. And for example, families and kid-friendly activities was something that we had thought of course, but had never really developed to the fullest of potential. So when it comes to our customers before COVID, a lot of it was a very even split between international travelers and locals looking for something to do at home, a lot of corporate engagement, a lot of people looking for activities for team away days, that type of thing, a lot of universities and schools, but we didn't really have families coming on looking for activities to do in the city. So right now, this is a big thing that we're trying to focus on, and of course trying to focus again with big groups of students and pupils from schools. And now on to the next slide, please. But I think a really exciting part, it's been incredibly hard, I think, for everybody that I speak to in tourism, whether they're social enterprises or not, but also for people running these businesses and you know, supporting those businesses. And it's been incredibly hard for me personally the last few months, but I really like focusing on the positive, and what I've seen come through is an eagerness and a lot more engagement and wish to create really cool partnerships. I think it's made people think outside of the box sometimes, and I just added a few logos onto this slide of 3 organisations, one social enterprise being the Edinburgh Remakery, but also a hotel, really high-end hotel, and a virtual or a self-guided app. With all of these we're going to start working with very soon, and all of this came out in May, about May time, so during lockdown. And it was to show that, you know, all of this was created so that we could find avenues and different ways of us working, but also for them to find different ways of working. And Charlotte Square, for instance, the Kimpton, sorry, as a hotel has focused a lot of their energy now into sustainability and into having an impact now in the city, but also in the way they communicate, in the way they welcome guests, in the way they include people from all walks of life as part of their staff team, and all of that we can do together, I believe. So, you know, now we offer tours for them, for their guests, private tours that the concierge can just book from one day to the next, but we also will do training together for our staff, and that's when it all goes back to our social impact, so that the folk that we work with that maybe don't want to stay guides forever, or maybe don't want to be tour guides at all because they need to improve their confidence in public speaking skills or customer serving skills, but they don't particularly feel comfortable being the center of attention for a full 2 hours, or they can still do that training and hopefully, you know, add on to their CVs that they've been trained with a hotel like the Kimpton. Questo is developing a quest in the city of Edinburgh for us, which is like a treasure hunt idea. So the really positive outcome of all of this has been that loads of organisations that I had never thought of have been thinking about how can we work together, or how can we help each other. And I hope you've all had the same experience as we have, which is a lot of our customers and a lot of our past customers or future customers have said exactly the same. We've received a lot of messages from people saying, how can we help? What can we do to support you? And there was a campaign or a hashtag, a tagline in the past, which was postpone, don't cancel, and that's worked out really well for us. But also we've had again people who started volunteering with us remotely because they were past customers and really wanted to support further. So it's generated a lot of positivity somehow. And finally, if we can go on to the next slide, it's generated new ideas altogether. So one thing, again, in line with us working with more children and families, we started developing little packs that you could download and print at home, and it would make you discover your cities through activities like mazes and colouring sheets and all of that. And we had them available on the site for free for people to have a look at, discover the work that we were doing, but mostly we did them so we could engage our guides, trainees and volunteers in a positive way, because they developed all the activities, all the content of that, and I just put it together. So as a trial at the end of May, at the end of March, I think, we put it out there, and it's had thousands and thousands of downloads. So it's been super popular. It's now the page on our website that has the most hits, even compared to our homepage. So the success of that was quite surprising. So from that, we developed a subscription box called Invisible Cities World Tour. And the idea is that every 3 months you can receive at home a subscription box that has loads of games and activities to help you discover a country as a little traveller from the comfort of your home. So we launched our first box this month on Scotland, of course, and then we'll have a Christmas box, and then we'll see what the other countries are without revealing too much. But the idea being that this generates interest and revenue on the longer term, regardless of our tours, or if there is another lockdown, if there is anything, this is more regular, and it engages little people in a different way than going on our tours. So of course, going back to that debate of who we are as an organisation and why we do what we do, we include a lot of information about homelessness in those countries. So in Scotland, and the little postcard that you can see on that photo is it's a fun postcard of Scotland, and we encourage children to write a message to somebody who's in temporary accommodation, because for each box that we sell, we send activity books, toys and games to a shelter. So we send a lot of stuff to Shakti Women's Aid here in Edinburgh, or to the families of big issue vendors. So it's all tied in with our mission, but at the same time has meant that we were a bit innovative and trying to find different ways to diversify, to pivot, my new favourite word. So I think that's it for me, Naomi, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Zakia. I've already got lots of questions written down, but I'll come to those both for you and Sarah, I guess, at the end. And please, if there's more questions that have come through as we go through, post them in the chat. Before we come to the Q&A, delighted to welcome our last presenter today, Matt McGrandles. Ceangail, I keep practicing, I'll get there eventually. And yeah, I'll just hand over to you now, Matt, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
That's great, thank you. So likewise, thanks very much for the opportunity to present our experience. My name is Matt McGrandles, I'm founder of Ceangail. Let me just take you through some of our experiences from this year. So I thought it would be a good idea just to give you some background. Ceangail was launched in 2012 and we started trading in 2014. We managed to find an office space in Stirling in 2015. And our social aim is we support young people on their journey towards employment through practical training experiences by linking our free training programs with our events. As was mentioned before, our flagship tourism event is Stirling Highland Games. And just to give you some idea of what we've done over the last 6 years, since 2014, we've attracted over 25,000 visitors to Stirling. We've generated over 1.7 million to the host economy. And last year, 47% of last year's visitors were from overseas. We have a huge interest from international visitors in what we're offering. Our training academy provided volunteer opportunities to over 300 individuals, and we've also supported up to 160 young people through one of our training programs. So our recent experiences this year, again, just to give you some bullet points on the 3 sections. With our Stirling Highland Games flagship event, we normally generate up to 80,000 in the first 8 months of the year. In February 2020, our online ticket sales were up 199% from the previous year. And after what happened, income fell to 0 following the cancellation of the event. On the COVID-19 grant side, Ceangail applied and was turned down by the RR Fund twice and the Small Business Support Grant. On our 4th attempt, we did manage to secure a couple of grand from the Third Sector Resilience Fund. And essentially moving on to the Pivotal Enterprise Fund, we felt we continued to fall through all the cracks until then. And in May, we received some funds. We decided to take things online and create 2 virtual programs this year. The Best of Stirling with Stirling Highland Games. It was really important from our point of view and the committee's point of view that we did not let 12 months go by having built up 6 years of momentum. So rather than try and do a virtual Highland Games in terms of the restrictions that would entail, we decided to turn it on its head and actually put the programme surrounding a viewer's or a visitor's point of view. What would they experience if they actually came to the event? So the virtual programme was a huge success from our side. We created over 60 pre-recorded clips showing over 3 hours worth of footage. Our programme reached over 140,000 across all our platforms. The programme was viewed by over 43,000 across all our platforms, and there was over 4,000 engagements with the programme. The second virtual programme that we are looking to basically create and will be delivered in November is called the Frontline Festival Scotland. And we're looking to deliver that on St Andrew's Day. This is to be supported by up to 30 Scottish artists or bands. The festival is free to view, but our aim is to ask for donations for the Frontline 4 charities. And again, we're looking to provide a practical opportunities for young people within that project. Unfortunately, due to the timings of the grant giving, we didn't receive word well enough in advance to actually involve what we've done for the last 6 years. our young people in the training of what we were trying to do with Stirling Highland Games, the virtual programme. So we're now going to relook at that, and we're looking to deliver an intermediate training programme for up to 10 young people as part of the Frontline Festival. Moving on, speaking about future plans and our knowledge, just things that we can share. I'm sure there'll be others out there, but the grant application experience proved hugely frustrating and was a huge challenge for us. There's a reason why Ceangail generates the majority of its income from our project services rather than rely on grants. We were literally 2 weeks away from closing the doors when we secured the Pivotal Enterprise grant. However, I believe the positives that Ceangail's application was based on our tourism event plays a key part in boosting the local economy. We support the events delivery chain. Our ask was clear on pivoting our event delivery to our virtual delivery, and the company could bridge 2020, so there was a good chance of us being able to still be around in 2021. Ceangail is exploring tourism-related opportunities for 2021 that brings together several organisations to collaborate on delivery. And that then moves on to kind of predictions. And this is basically just some thoughts I've had. Let's put them out there. More than happy to have a discussion about them, but it's based on our experience to date. It's going to take up to 5 years for tourism levels to bounce back. The 2021 tourism offering needs to be more creative, focusing on specific visitor needs and taking into account social distancing. We need to reconnect and plan tourism offerings for the local and regional markets, and if government guidelines permit, extend to the UK. It's something that will be looked at and will be the top of people's agenda, visitors' agenda, as you can all expect, will be hygiene. We need to create different online experiences for overseas visitors, as there is still an appetite to see and experience Scotland. I would recommend that not just become a member of SES and SENScot, but reach out for others like Scottish Tourism Association, visit Scotland regional hubs and the local chamber. There's a huge amount of information that we also rely on when it comes to tourism, and we like to be trying to be part of them all. And lastly, governments need to deliver funds, further levels of support for tourism related businesses. I personally would have liked to have seen some sort of fund that surrounded a 12-month holding pattern for all tourism related businesses, so we can at least get through the winter months and get into 2021 and see where we're actually from there. Thanks very much for listening. More than happy to basically be part of the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's interesting to me, I guess, seeing both how you've had to adapt and change, and obviously hearing some of the frustration as well as you talk through. I know that will be felt by a number of people as well. You won't be on your own in that, sadly. But I'm interested as well in terms of the pivot question, and giving you a last on while everyone else just perhaps starts up their video and audio again for the Q&A. I'm interested in where you've had to kind of pivot and change. What is it that you think you will, is there anything that you've had to do differently that you think you will keep for the future once we're out of a COVID situation, that you think maybe some businesses talk about almost that they've been pushed into digital, but they've been planning it? I mean, it's different if you're a physical event to some degree, but are there still elements of kind of things that you've had to adapt and change that you think you will keep, that you've learnt from? Oh, you're just on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I think, you know, we obviously deliver larger outdoor events, and I think as we move forward, there needs to be less restrictions, financial restrictions, more cost effective on actually being able to offer some sort of virtual event. I definitely, for 2021, I don't think there's any question that we need to be looking at some sort of a blended mix offering that includes, if we are allowed to run the 2021 event in August, we might well need to limit the numbers due to social distancing. Of course, that completely eats into our ticket sales, and how our whole existence is based on selling more tickets. So therefore, how do we maximise that opportunity on the virtual front? So very much so, we need to take what we're learning in 2020 and apply that in 2021, as well as a huge discussion just now is about how do we monetize that properly. So this year we offered it for free, but next year we really need to get to grips about how we monetize what we're actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, I guess, Zakia, to some degree, you talked about that in terms of the digital downloads and the resources you created, and I guess looking at how they were always free, but how are you trying to link those now to a strategy more for the long term about income generation? Do you see that it's really hard sometimes to ask organisations that have struggled to say, oh, the bits that you think it's pushed you in to look at that have been positive for the future as well?
Yeah, and I think, you know, the question of monetizing what you do, because you still want to be fresh on your customers' minds and to be able to offer certain products, but you also compete against huge organizations that offer a lot of free content all the time. And as a consumer, you know, I would probably, like, so we looked into doing training when it comes to sustainable tourism, but a lot of that is available out there for free. So how do you then compete against those huge organizations that have a lot more budget when it comes to marketing customers or Facebook ads or whatever? And it creates this, you know, workload with financially no return. And so I think building on that brand and fidelity from people who have hopefully attended your event for free or have downloaded our resources for free to then come back and pay and support. And I think it comes to messaging and say, well, actually next year when you come, you also support the mission that we have.
Yeah, I think it's so hard, isn't it? I think just that sense of trying to bring people with you and keep the interest, I guess, is the key thing that I guess that you've touched on in terms of invisible cities. You've got lots of people, and I know in chat someone had already posted from someone that had been on the tour saying how great it was, and you want to keep those people not kind of disappear in that interim period. A couple more questions just to Matt and Zakia, and then I'm going to bring you in, Sarah, just around some of the challenges, because I don't think we can avoid that these challenges still exist. Much as I like to run sessions that are positive and upbeat, we can't forget that this is still a difficult time. So it's perhaps just, I want to pick up just on this thing around values, Zakia, that I think was really interesting, and I wonder whether, you know, obviously values drive our social enterprises. It's why we're here. It's why we do a lot of what we do. And I'm really interested in terms of the conversations you had kind of perhaps with others in your team about how did you look at some opportunities that you then said, actually, this doesn't really fit with what we're trying to do and it could be great, and rule them out? And how did you bring values into your decision making around what you pivoted around, because this will be critical, I think, to so many organisations?
I think, to me, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have, and so we also, I feel, are really lucky because we work with organisations that are really big. So, for example, when Airbnb started having experiences in Edinburgh, we were one of the first impact experience that ended up being on the platform, and that generated a lot of chat around whether or not we wanted to partner with an organisation like Airbnb because they're evil and all of that, you know. But at every step of the way, we try to have those conversations. So the value and the ethos and the way that we work is constant for us, and we always, when we do meetings, staff meetings or meetings with guides as well, trainees, bring it back to say our values are honesty and having honest conversations and having debates, and that's part of our core training. But one thing that's happened, because it was even so more visible during this period, is that we decided to maybe phrase it in a more official way, as opposed to be something you disseminate everywhere in all conversation or team meetings, to have, you know, a proper space on our website and space on our, you know, documents for staff that goes through our values, maybe have a little formula of who we are and how we work. And I think because it has definitely highlighted it to me that we were working on that, but sometimes it was more with your gut feeling and with just the way you regularly work, as opposed to have it in a formalized way. But I'm a big believer that we need to build bridges between organizations. So I want to work with the Amazons of the world, with Airbnbs of the world, because otherwise there will always be a them and us world, and we can work together and do really positive things if we have honest conversations, and if we have, you know, they know what we stand for and we know what they stand for, that type of thing. And that only comes through practice every day, and sometimes really consciously in a really hard way. But I think, yeah, it's definitely highlighted it during these last few months.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think values just underwrite so much of what we do, whether, like you say, it's how we pivot, it's the partnerships we develop. And again, I was running a session the other week on raising investment, and it's like, who do you actually want to invest in your organisation, and who do you get support from? And actually, just to some of our organisations, our values can limit some of those investment opportunities as well. So it underlines everything we do, I think, and should do. That's why we call social enterprises. I always say that social's the first word in social enterprise, so let's make sure we don't forget that.
But it's hard when you can generate income and survive by maybe going somewhere you would have not thought otherwise. It's some people in my team didn't understand that, because they're like, no, I don't want to do this. Yes, but if you don't, then there's no team, because so it's also as inclusive as we can be from the level of our beneficiaries. So from our guides, understanding how we work as a business, because sometimes you have this idea, it's a little bit when people think you are a team of 25 and actually it's only 2 behind the screen going completely mad. It's having a true representation of that, so that people are clear and decide on what they want to do comfortably, and then you go ahead with that. But yeah, I think, to me, like I said, it's the biggest challenge probably, and has been the biggest challenge through this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's often why we say we need sometimes specialist support in our sector. We need people that understand that value motivation and why we're doing what we do. I wanted to just pick up on Matt, in your presentation. You were kind of projecting, kind of looking forwards, and we're in a time at the moment where it's very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen, and that's part of the challenge. And I guess you talked a bit about kind of looking at a blended approach for 2021. And perhaps even that kind of looking at a 5-year landscape, and when you think you'll get kind of back to normal, if that's the right phrase. We kind of want to get back to normal and don't, I guess, is also where we are in lots of our conversations at the moment. How do you think the longer term effects on tourism related businesses will be, and what would your advice be to other organisations out there in terms of how they're looking at 2021?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's under the illusion it's not going to be a massive challenge. And dare I say it, there's probably going to be the smaller businesses go under. But for looking forward, I think there's a key bit here where definitely collaboration is something I would say to any smaller tourism, of which we are, small kind of tourism events organisation, is to reach out and try and collaborate, not just with social enterprises, but with others, commercial businesses as well. I think there needs to be that scenario where other businesses need to start seeing value in what the social enterprise world actually offers, and opening their doors to possibly work alongside us. That includes supporting us in terms of what we do. We have a good network. It's been built up over 6 years. We have good relationships with Visit Scotland and Event Scotland as an organisation. We have built up a lot of our sponsors, some of them who have been on board with us since 2014 when we first started. And that comes back to in terms of what we are actually trying to do, because although we are, yes, tourism related with events, we've not forgotten our social aim of trying to support young people develop those employability skills. We think the offering that we have on that is quite an exciting one, based on, we don't traditionally do the kind of CV writing. Lots of other organisations do that. We're very much focused on practical learning. Don't get me wrong, that's a huge problem for us just now because of COVID. We're trying to take our training programs online. We're still trying to look at doing a training program for our young people as part of the Frontline Festival Scotland, social distanced, and to see how all that can happen. But for me, I definitely think it's about basically reaching out and trying to build that kind of network around you to try and keep everyone going and get through this.
Thank you, Matt. I guess the mention of networks leads me nicely into coming back to Sarah, which is, it's like we scripted it or something, but we haven't. Obviously, we've heard from Zakia and Matt around how they've adapted, and you'll have much more broader experience, Sarah, from a number of social enterprises across the tourism sector. And I wanted to pick up on perhaps two key things maybe with you. One was, have you found that other tourism enterprises have also found challenges around accessing some of the support and finance? And then following on from that, what do you think they're going to need in the longer term? Is there something that we should be looking at to really try and help businesses in this arena over the next 12 months? Things like the recovery programme that are out there, is it helpful? Are there bits where it's still a barrier? Just some thoughts and perceptions from you around that.
So, yeah, I mean, social enterprises are facing a variety of different challenges, some of them the same as Matt and Zakia are talking about, some of them quite different. I think what's really interesting is how differently social enterprises have maybe reacted to traditional business, in that they really have they put community first. So we've seen lots of tourism organisations suddenly become community anchor organisations, which was really interesting. They haven't previously recognised themselves as that, but they really stepped up and became that central point within their community. So that's been really interesting. I think as we go forward, so there's a couple of things. The ethical issue, you know, connecting with those ethical visitors and keeping those relationships alive, we need to do some work on that going forward. There's a lot of chat, there's a lot of marketing towards ethical visitors. There's a lot of talk about young people wanting to holiday in a very different way. But actually there's very little evidence. So pre-COVID, we'd started conversations with Visit Scotland around measuring some of that. And we will go back and revisit that. But I think that as we go forward, we've seen a shift, certainly in Scotland, in the way that people are visiting their own country and the way they're behaving in Scotland. So you know, there's some marketing to be done around that. That's not our responsibility, but there is a responsibility for us to share our stories and to kind of and get that message across. So we will certainly be picking up some of that stuff with Visit Scotland going forward, and that is a huge challenge, how to connect with those visitors, whether they're digital visitors, like, you know, attending. Matt had people from all over the world watching the Highland Games, and Zakia has people from all over the world coming and visiting normally, non-COVID times, has people connecting from all over the world. So you know, there's huge opportunity to explore that market. The other issue that is popping up is obviously around communities having a control over their tourism. So we've certainly seen and continue to see issues around over tourism. We would have thought that would have dropped away during COVID, but actually it's risen in some areas. Certainly some of the islands quite afraid to open doors again, but certainly rural areas really suffering from over tourism. So we're currently working on a project funded by the Tourism Division that is a proof of concept around let's look at this completely differently. Actually, let's shift away from this top-down approach from Scottish Enterprise High and Visit Scotland and start giving control to communities. So again, you know, we want to connect with as many social enterprises as possible to kind of gather evidence around that. We're going to be working in two particular areas, South Ayrshire and Angus, but there's lots of connections to make across the country around what's going to be happening there, and how we can really shift that conversation, because we're really looking at seismic change there when it comes to a support system. You know, we're asking them, this isn't about communities that already have a relationship with a support organisation, that have a friend who works there, that have somebody who lives in the village. this is about actually making a shift across the country so that communities have control over their own tourism offer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point, that kind of balance between community and the tourism business within it. I stay down on the southwest coast, and I know here, you know, we've got many of our businesses wanting the tourists come in, but we're also quite an elderly population. So there's quite a nervousness around how full the caravan site is, and yet businesses need it, and actually how you manage that tension within your community. And I'm interested, perhaps Matt, to bring you in on that, because obviously everything's been digital this year, but do you see that that's kind of going to be one of your key things in terms of that link with attracting people if you've got physical events in the future, and that community safety angle? That's something new that you're going to really have to work on moving forwards?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it in terms of it was probably one of the top priorities when visitors are looking for that kind of almost tick box on hygiene. Certainly, I think it's something we're going to have to take on board, not just for 2021, but beyond that. Really kind of trying to reassure what visitors that it's a safe environment to basically come and visit. And I think that's a lot to do with, you know, messaging beforehand, making sure that you've got the right things in the right place at the right time, etc. Conveying those messages, continuing to convey those messages right up until the event, and then hopefully at that point getting some positive feedback from those visitors. So looking at the Stirling Highland Games in 2021, then that will be one of how do we convey those positive messages to potential visitors. And again, it also might come back down to, as I see it, there is a huge chance we might be trying to attract that local or regional audience and then do virtual with the international audience. But we need that blended approach.
Yeah, no, I mean, the safety thing's really interesting. I know, particularly, I guess, in the area where I stay, we had at one point that balance of kind of one rule for England and one in Scotland, and yet we have visitors from Scotland and England coming to our town, and some were wanting to follow their own country's rules, and it did cause certain bits of tension here. So I think that's particularly the thing when you start to get visitors from out with the local area or used to following different kind of regimes and protocols, that can become quite a challenge. Yep. So it's interesting to see. And just obviously, Zakia, you said you've got plans moving forwards. Do you are you hopeful for 2021? Do you think you'll still be delivering quite a different model in 2021, but you'll be set to go 2022, or are you just having to take every day as it comes?
It depends what day of the week you ask me. So sometimes I'm quite hopeful because I do see the collaboration happening and this eagerness to do things together, and it's brought us more together, I think, to face those challenges as one. But it is a fearful time because, like many other, we got some support early on during lockdown from the third sector resilience fund, but that only goes so far. So comes a point where we'll have we have to sell, and that's incredibly hard. So even saying visitors back from the 1st of August, we had limited numbers on tours and guys wearing masks and protective plastic visors and hand sanitizers, and we're outside all the time, and we can respect, we're lucky in a way that we can respect safe distancing, but even with those in place, the level that we did was nothing compared to even the month of February or January, which for us was a quiet month. So that scares me quite a lot, and I think, yeah, taking it one day at a time most of the time, because even with, like you were saying, the restrictions between England and Scotland, that, I manage two cities in England and 2 cities in Scotland. And so we have to go with different rules. And we do the same thing, and we do, so we're having to stay tuned, and that that creates anxiety, and we can't, you know, copy one or the other. So I think, yeah, trying to adapt and work collaboratively, that gives me positivity and hope for the future. But actually, just seeing what's going to happen next, I think is important.
Yeah, no, it's hard, isn't it? Sarah, I can see you waving your hand if you wanted to come in.
I was just going to say, I've put P4P's the contact details into the chat function, but I think when it comes to collaboration, there's a lot of conversation around collaboration going forward, even down to organisations that don't have space working with organisations that do have space. You know, there's a huge variety of different things, but just a shout out really to anybody who's thinking about collaboration to get in touch with P4P for a bit of support around that. And also to think about that collective purchasing as well, because that's something we've been exploring, and there's opportunities to maybe save some pennies here and there, you know, looking at working with some of your other I think, Zakia, as well, some of the big organisations that you already have good relationships with, is there the potential to look at collective purchasing with them? You know, there's lots of opportunities, so there's support around that.
And I have to say, like, it's true, loads of big organizations. So I always mention Airbnb because we work quite well with them, and I know it's always and I really, and you know, I think it's not perfect, but for when it comes to working with us, they've always been really supportive. But they were one of the first organizations that approached us and said, okay, how are you doing? What can we do to help? What is going on? And then they obviously moved all of their experience space to the virtual world. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand what a good virtual experience is, with or without us having it on Airbnb, you know. And they committed the time to spend that time with our team to say, okay, well, you are a tour, so obviously you want to do it a certain way. And I think there is a lot of eagerness and just people wanting to reach out, even when sometimes I totally agree with thinking outside of the box for collaboration with businesses maybe you never thought you could do something with, but actually create, you know, something really unique and you know, thinking, okay, if the world is completely different now, then I can do and think anything. And sometimes that's a challenge, because last week I had a team meeting where I asked everybody in the team who they want to work with, say all the brands, all the companies, all the people, all the celebrities in the world, who would you want to work with? And I realized that sometimes we can quite limit ourselves, because nobody was really, you know, saying anything really mad. And I just thought, you know, they're just like the local museum or this and that. Yeah, but who else? And I really tried to convey this. If the world is a crazy place, who would you want to work with? And I think we were all kind of limiting ourselves and our own thinking, and sometimes that can be a challenge in itself. So doing that exercise is really worthwhile, I think, as well.
It's interesting. I think we have to focus on some of the positives that have come out of our current situation. Otherwise, we would always be feeling like we're having bad days. But that real sense to look at things differently in a way that we have never thought to look at doing stuff before actually has had some real positives as well. And I think we're all trying to hold on to those bits that are positive just now as well. I'm conscious that we're coming towards the end, so if anyone had any just last questions, because we are at 12:30, and we tried to keep these quite tight. I did wonder whether to just answer. I'm going to ask a question about, do you think to some degree, and I'm trying to focus on the positives, do you think COVID will have kind of got people thinking much more about holidaying at home moving forwards? Or is there a bit of a fear that perhaps as soon as we're able to feel confident travelling again, will we suddenly see another dip? And how are you kind of thinking of that in terms of social enterprise and tourism here in Scotland? Do you think we'll have a boost for the longer term, or is there still a bit of a nervousness that when people are confident on a plane again, we'll lose some of that impetus that we've had for holidaying at home?
Some of that scenario planning the Visit Scotland are doing will be looking at some of those questions. We can't really guess, can we, what people are going to do, but I would assume that there'll be a slow shift. There probably won't be a sudden shift. There'll be certain people that are happy, that want out of the country and want to go to a beach, but there'll probably be a slower shift for an awful an awful lot more, but those scenario plans are worth looking at.
So really hook in with the work that Visit Scotland are doing, I guess, and if you are in the tourism sector, I guess the tourism SEN's going to be keeping much more of a closer eye on that, and I would encourage you to join it and kind of be part of those conversations and discussions. Matt, just any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just to basically, I agree with what Sarah's basically saying there. I think there is obviously a percentage of people who do want to go to their beaches, etc. But I think, what we need to look at just now is, and people need to appreciate, is how can we holiday in our own country and start to experience, whether they've been there, before and haven't been back for a while, or whether they've never been there at all. Get those messages out there and get people to actually say, I tell you what, we're going to spend some money within the tourism, within Scotland, and hopefully keep us obviously going. But yeah, I think it's going to be, we'll need to focus on that for a couple of years. And then it's going to be a gradual shift back to people obviously getting back on planes, etc.
Yeah, and Zakia, just any final thoughts from you, and then I'll draw the session to a close.
Yeah, I think I saw a shift in people's behaviour and attitude towards tourism and travelling beforehand. People being more conscious of where their money was going and being conscious travellers, or wanting to support initiatives and local communities, and that hopefully has put even more of an emphasis onto that. And I think it's definitely made us think about what tourism means overall, how it changes the world, or why we like it, or why we do it. And as a traveller, I would fall into that category of people that as soon as I can get out, I will get out. But I'm guilty of that. I will say, I'll go onto a beach, or I'll go to France where I'm from, or but I've always been a traveller that's conscious of buying local and going for sustainable accommodation providers or whatever. So, but I think it's highlighted what tourism, what space it has, travelling, and why we love it so much. And hopefully, we can have added a bit of conscious consumerism into it and impact, and I hope that's what we will do. Whether or not people will not go back to the beaches or will stay at home, I don't know, but I think that's why it's for all of us to work together, and to work as a whole, and Scotland of course, but with other destinations as well, and to kind of make it work all together.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm looking at myself thinking, I think post-lockdown I'd certainly look better in a rain jacket on a Scottish beach than a bikini on a Spanish beach, but I'm sure I won't be the only one in that situation. On that very flippant note, and I wanted to say thank you all for joining us. I would encourage you, if you're a tourism business, to look at joining the Tourism SEN. There's lots of advice out there. There's lots of connections. You'll learn from other people that are in the same arena of work as you, so it's definitely worth making those connections. And then perhaps just the final bit I was just going to say for today, next week we are doing a session around marketing, and I would encourage people to do that. And we're also looking at aligning some bootcamp sessions around some basic marketing and communications support moving forwards. And the last little plug I was just going to do today, and albeit the deadline was 12 o'clock, if you're interested, we would let you put in an application late, but we're looking at highlighting some of the really positive things that groups and social enterprises have been able to do through COVID as well, through a digital showcase. We know it's really tough on lots of organisations, but we still want to use the opportunity to show what social enterprise is capable of when it's become that community anchor organisation, when it's needed to, how it's adapted. So if you want any more information on the digital showcase and you want to put in a late application, it would have to be fairly quick still, but do contact us and look at the SES pages on that. And thank you very much for joining us all today. Thank you to all my panellists, and have a good day.
Thank you.